Welcome everyone to a brand new session of You Can Sit With Us. If you're new here, what is it? I'm going to tell you. Every week, we put a spotlight on someone who I consider to be a real life hero and someone who deserves your attention, at least for one of these sessions, because hopefully you walk away having learned something or getting a little bit of perspective of what people do and how you can get involved. This whole idea started because of the Black Lives Matter movement that kind of resurfaced after the George Floyd horror, shall I say, where the internet was overflowing with a lot of information, which is on the one hand really good, but on the other side, it made me a little bit nervous, especially for young people, on where do you find your sources and how do you know what to believe and what not to believe. So what we try to do every week with the session is actually broadening the topics of what you could have opinions on. Sometimes they're very personal, sometimes they're more theory, sometimes they're very practical, but it's always relating to either education, health, policy, politics, anything that you actually take part in by simply existing. And I'd like you to meet people who have a real knowledge on these topics because they don't just have a passion for it, but they live and breathe it because they dedicate their 9 to 5s to these subjects. And all I want you to do is get some tools from us, from the speakers. I have nothing to do with it. From the speakers, and then decide what are your own opinions. How do you feel about these things based on not something you saw on Instagram, but because you've heard and learned something and was able to process information in a different way. Very long intro, but it's the same thing every week. And if you have any suggestions or topics that you want to hear more about, do let me know. This week, we have someone who I know personally. So I know that this is going to be a very, well, Nasim, are you going to crack some jokes in between? Because you're funny.
Am I? No one ever tells me I'm funny. I'm shook. Okay, girl, let me crack some jokes.
You're funny on nights out.
Okay.
That's usually when I would see you, so I think you're really funny. Oh. We have Nasim Salad, who is a policy officer, advocacy policy?
Policy and advocacy officer, yeah.
The other way around. Policy and advocacy officer for an organization called One Campaign.
Yes.
And I know very little about One Campaign. I only know what you've told me very briefly in an email. So hopefully by the end of today, I will also know everything about your role, what it looks like, and what the organization does. But we always start in the same way, and that is, who are you and what do you do?
Thanks, Jyoty. Thank you for having me. So as you said, my name is Nasim Salad. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Officer at the One Campaign. So I sit in our UK team, and we're like across Europe, Africa, and the Americas, and each market kind of has a similar function in a sense that they've got like a policy officer that works on their country's issues. Sorry, you asked me who I was and what else did you ask me? It's early for me, so I'm just kind of like getting my thoughts together.
It's okay. And what do you do? So actually, maybe what does a policy and advocacy officer do?
So maybe it'd be easy just to explain what One does at them. They're an international development organisation, but we don't have any programs on the ground. We just purely do advocacy and campaigns. And the offices are in like our Western European countries, put pressure on their governments that spend aid money to spend it well, or to fund important projects that we think are great, such like if it's like Gavi, which is like the Global Vaccine Alliance, and they develop vaccines for various different diseases, or whether if it's like for girls' education. But my specific role is that I analyse how effective UK aid policy is. So I look at where their money is going, is it spent right, what department is spending it, why are you spending money in China and not money in Africa. So that's specific to my policy aspect of my job. And then the advocacy side is like go into Parliament and talk to MPs and try to get them on board with our issues. But I also meet civil servants as well in the relevant departments and try to get them on board too.
I immediately have about 100 million questions just from that brief description of what you do. Let's start with how you got to where you are now. So where does your journey start, and how did it lead you to having this, what sounds like a super impressive and super interesting job? Did you always know you wanted to do this?
No, actually, like when I was doing my A levels, I actually wanted to go to uni to do fashion because I was like, I was gonna do fashion, girl. And then my mum was like, don't do a fashion degree because when you come out of uni, you will only have a fashion degree. But if you did like a broad degree, you can still go into fashion. That was her advice. And I was like, okay, fine, good advice, I'll take it.
Fair
So
point. Very
yeah,
fair.
so I did history and international relations at uni.
We've done I knew this actually. We've done similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I really liked international relations, and that kind of made me think, oh, maybe fashion's not for me. And then I had like an internship at Alexander McQueen, and I turned it down. Yeah, but then I did. I got a scholarship at my uni to do international development and security, which was great because it was all paid for. So I did like my master's degree, and then then I came out of uni, spent a whole year looking for jobs like most students do. I did everything from bar work to retail to admin, like you name it, I've done it. And then I found it really hard to find a job, so I went volunteering in Tanzania for like 4 or 5 months, and then I came back, and I got the internship at one, and I've been there for 3.5 years now. No longer an intern and full member staff.
How did you, okay, what was going on in Tanzania, and how did you then find the internship, and why do you think that, were those two related to each other? Like, why do you think doing that internship, the volunteering work led to getting the internship?
Because I was in Tanzania for like 4 months, and I was with an organization called Restless Development, and we worked with like kids in schools to teach them like those different life hacks. But I think in the development sector, it's really, really hard to get your foot in the door, because I kind of feel like it's one of those things where it's quite lucrative. I think people want to work in the sector, but it is difficult to be seen and to be heard. And I think having that experience of me essentially volunteering on the ground on issues that an organization would be working in made my CV stand out a little bit more than others who weren't. But there were other aspects, I guess, in my CV too. Like, for example, at uni, I was the president of the Feminist Society, and we were like the first society to be started up. So I think just little things like that probably made my CV stand out. But I definitely think the volunteering helped for sure.
And then, right, so you now have this internship, and you said 3.5 years later, you're still with the company. What did you do as an intern, and how did that progress into becoming like such a prominent member of staff?
Yeah, do you know what? Actually, I was saying to this someone the other day. My job in itself hasn't changed that much from when I was an intern. Sure, I definitely have way more responsibility now, and I know what I'm doing compared to when I was an intern. I was like, whoa, but I still did the same things. You know, I wrote policy briefings, I wrote letters to MPs. I was like mapping out MPs to try and talk to, like really digging into our policy issues. I remember I had to write like a policy paper on education, and I was like, I don't know anything about education. But, you know, they're really supportive and really helpful. So it's not changed much, but it's definitely got more responsibility, I think, from now. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can imagine. I think anytime you're new in any environment, you kind of learn on the job in most jobs, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And you
Definitely.
kind of pretend to know what you're doing. And by the end of a project, you're like, oh my God, I now actually know what I'm doing. And no
Yeah,
one
it's
has to
really
tell.
funny. Like when I first started writing my briefings, I used to have like 10 drafts because every time I'd send it and they were like, oh, send it back. We got loads of corrections. And now it's obviously slimmed down to like 2, which is a massive change from being like an intern to, yeah.
Amazing. Now you really know what you're doing, clearly.
Yes, one would hope.
I'd really have faith that you do. Few things that caught my attention. In your intro, when you said we have offices in the Western countries, and we had a little, obviously we can see each other on the camera now. We had a little look. Explain
Yeah.
what you mean by that, and why wouldn't they not be in non-Western?
So we do. So we have offices in Nigeria, South Africa, I think Senegal too. But we also have the offices in like Canada, America, uh, Belgium, Germany, France, Netherlands, Italy, UK, and Ireland. So essentially, those are all donor governments. So they're governments that give aid money to developing countries, and each country market, whether it's like in France or US or Canada, try to influence their governments to put their aid budget into places that we think the money is needed. But then our offices in Africa influence their government to spend their budget better. So like our Nigerian colleagues would put pressure on their government to spend more money on health from like their own budget. And yeah, so like we kind of work in tandem. So we have like the policy influencing government, but we also have a huge public mobilization element of our organization. We have like members all over the world and supporters. So we work with like our UK supporters, and we have like youth ambassadors, which are like really young, amazing volunteers that do like work in their constituencies or talk to their MPs on our behalf, because having that public pressure from constituents as well as like policy experts in government kind of really, really helps to put the pressure onto the government.
So now when you say having an impact or an influence on how aid money is spent by the government, how many organizations, bodies, parties have a say in this or are involved in this decision-making process?
So we're not involved in the decision-making process because we're not in government,
Yeah.
but obviously we are experts in this, and they do listen, but it's obviously dependent on politics and parliament and what's happening at the moment, especially in the UK. Like today in the news, there's been stories about the aid budget being cut, because we're one of the few countries in the world that has a legislative target to spend 0.7% of our GNI on aid. And that's a UN target that was set, and only a few countries in the world hit that target. The UK is one of them, and we've legislated for it. So it's quite contentious because everyone's kind of like, oh, you know, why are we the only country doing this? But we know we're rich, we can afford to. But it also means that if the economy is doing badly, then obviously we spend less money on aid.
Yeah.
But if the economy is doing well, you spend more money on aid, right? So yeah, that target is really, really, really contentious. And I think like the charity sector and the international development sector, like people like me, do have a voice in the sense to try to speak to government, to try and show them the impact that this target is making and actually making a difference to people's lives.
And when you say you go into parliament, talk us through it. How is the moment of a specific project or a specific case you'd be trying to make a case for, sorry to be double, and then going actually into parliament? Who do you speak to? How is that set up? What does a meeting like that look like? Who is in the room? Paint me the picture.
Yeah, so if I was to speak to like a backbench MP, because obviously if it's like someone from a ministerial team, the setup is different, but I can speak to that in a bit. But if I was just to meet like any ordinary random backbench MP that we wanted to, he might have said, or she might have said something on international development or global education or health or whatever that we're interested in Parliament. And then we can try and set up a meeting, and it'll be myself and a colleague, and we'll talk to them about what we do, what they're interested in, how they can help us. So, you know, do we want them to ask a question on our behalf, parliamentary questions? Do we want them to have like a conversation with the minister that they might be friends with on a particular topic? Do we want them to sign on to a letter to the Prime Minister to be like, I support this? Because, you know, it does make a difference. If you have parliamentary champions, then naturally the government is not going to slide things by and has to listen to what you're saying. But yeah, if we're meeting a minister, you know, they don't have a lot of time to have one-on-one meetings. So usually you'd have like 3 or 4 colleagues, or maybe sometimes you have like organizations that you're both working on the same issues with all come around to a table to speak to a minister, because yeah, they don't really have a lot of time to have one-on-one conversations with Nasim in Parliament. But yeah.
I love how you said, if I'm just talking to any regular regular backbench. And it just goes to show you're just used to all these people, that if you're a
Yeah.
backbench MP, you're kind of just anybody, you know?
Yeah, literally.
So when, for example, I think that's interesting when you have to sometimes go into a meeting with people from other organizations working on a similar topic. Can you name some organizations that you would sometimes share a room with?
Yeah, I mean, we do that a lot. Like, I literally have a meeting with a couple of organizations in a minute, like, because you're louder, your voice is louder when there's more of you, right? So if I'm working on global health, for example, I'd work with like Results UK or UNICEF or Save the Children. If I'm doing education, I'd do like the Malala Fund or work with educational colleagues. If it's aid in general, so there's like Bond, which is, I call it like the mothership of international development organizations in the UK, because they essentially are, and they convene us all together. So when things that happen, like the 0.7% target is being scrapped, Bond will pull together all of these organizations that work in the aid sector, so we can, be a bigger voice and write letters or think about strategy to try and influence the government together as one.
And when do you feel like in your day to day, or maybe even if you zoom out overall, you get to work on causes / cases that really are important to you on a personal level as well? I know it's, no one would directly say no, because eventually it's all for a good cause. But you said you, with being the president of the Feminist Club in uni and then going to Tanzania to do your volunteering, do you now feel like, hey, every day I deal with things that I, on a daily basis, care about, and I feel like we should care about?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, before I started at One, I had no idea about like the target and the aid budget and how it works, because it's very technical and very like policy like heavy. So I feel like unless you're in it, you don't know what's going on, right? Mm-hmm. So I would be lying if I said to you at university I wanted to work in like the quality of aid and how it's spent, because that's a lie. But obviously I was interested in like women's rights issues and like education and like everyone having access to like healthcare, which are all really important wide issues, and those are things that I get to work on like every single day. But of course, making sure that aid is spent well is important, because it needs to be going to the places it needs to. So yeah, I would definitely say so. I really do like working in the sector, and I feel like sometimes it's hard because you're working on such huge issues and you feel like the world is a mess, and like every day there's an outbreak of some disease in some country, and there's a war going on in this country, and there's a humanitarian crisis going in that country, and like this person's cutting their aid budget, and Trump's out here saying that he's not going to give any money to like the WHO, and a lot going on, right? So you do feel a bit overwhelmed, but you do see small progress every now and then, which I think is motivational enough for me to stay in the sector, that is.
How big is your office?
So we have like 200 people who work in our organization, but the bulk of those people are actually in the DC office. So in the London office, I might be lying, but I want to say 40, but in my UK team specifically, there's 8.
That's a lot smaller than I thought it would be.
Yes, yeah, we're a loud voice for a small organization, I would say.
And that's representing UK?
Yes, just the UK. Actually, the UK and Ireland team. So we're split across 2.
And do all 8 people have the same role as you, or what are the different roles within like the UK
Yeah,
team?
so we have like me and my manager, we do policy and advocacy. Mm-hmm. And then we have like the campaigns team in my team. So they work with our public supporters and our youth ambassadors and do like the public mobilization aspect of the role. And then we have like my media colleagues who deal with media, doing media hits. I don't know anything about media. I'm just like, they put in op-eds in newspapers. Like,
what are media hits?
So for example, we might get some MPs to write an article in like Times Red Box or the Telegraph, or they might want to get our director on the radio to talk about an issue, or even smaller things like get youth ambassadors to put stories in their local newspapers or local radio, anything really just to get us out there and mentioned and loud and talking about our issues.
Okay, so everyone kind of, amongst 8 people, you kind of cover all grounds.
Yeah, in the
to...
UK, yeah.
And
I
how
know.
often do you deal with colleagues in different offices then?
Often. So we have like a global policy and global marketing team, which their job is to work across the board. So the global policy team are really policy wonky heavy, and they don't focus on a specific country, they focus on issues. So for example, if I wanted to do something about education, I would go to my education policy lead in the global policy team, and she has all the facts and the numbers and she knows everything about it and she lives in it every single day, whereas I might live in it like once a week.
Right.
You know. And then we also, so when we were in the EU, RIP, I might work with our European colleagues and who are based in Brussels and do some stuff around like EU work, or if we have like a joint like massive organizational campaign, if we're working on the G7, for example, most of our markets are in the G7, we would work together.
G7, could you explain?
What is the G7? It's just basically a club full of rich countries, basically, and they come together once a year to talk about global issues and foreign affairs. But there's also the G20 as well. But the G7 is like a closer tie. So let me try and remember the countries: UK, US, Canada, France, Italy. Who were the other two? Germany. I'm missing one, aren't I?
Is Luxembourg in there?
No. Anyway, sorry to that country that I forgot about. But yeah, so they all come together and talk on like massive policy. So for example, the G7 this year has been hosted by the US, even though that's a bit contentious, but we won't go there. And they might, they'll talk about coronavirus, the economy, I don't know, China, Russia, huge geopolitical issues. So for us, it's an opportunity to get our like international development policies on paper, because we know that they're going to come together, and there's an opportunity to get them to be in one and put issues on the agenda.
Now, has the UK leaving, England leaving the European Union affected your work much?
Not necessarily, because the UK is still a massive powerhouse for development without the EU anyway. But we were given the EU like 1.4 billion pounds of aid money a year, because it was like 10% of our budget. But now that we're leaving the EU, there's questions around, well, where's that 1.4 billion gonna go, right?
Interesting.
So that's kind of like an interesting way to look at it as well. But yeah, I mean, I can't see us not working closely with the EU on things that, we're closely tied with, but the EU has its own rules and regulations and their budgetary processes, and I'm not going to bore you with them because it is long and very boring. But yeah, if you're not an EU member state, it's basically difficult for you to contribute to that budget anyway. So there's like a whole other thing there that they're going to have to work out. But obviously, amongst the other things that they have to work out with the EU, development is going to be bottom of the list. Top of the list is going to be things like trade, border issues, right? Development is like, we'll talk about it later.
It's mad though, isn't it, that that's how it goes? And actually, we are all aware that that's how it goes as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you tell me, Nasim, how a regular week at work looks like for you? Talk me through anything that comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, it varies. So I might be like writing briefings or reports. I might be
Question.
Yeah.
What are briefings?
Good question. It depends who that briefing is for. So say, for example, an MP was doing a debate in Parliament on something. I might write them a briefing on global health and coronavirus, so they can like have all that information, all the facts. But then I could also be writing a briefing for my director who might need something for something that she's going to. So it really depends who it is, but it's basically a document that has information, facts, figures, arguments on a particular policy issue. So at the moment, for example, there's an integrated review, which is like a review that the government's doing on their foreign policy, and they have a call for evidence. And I'm writing that submission on behalf of our organisation. So that would be something that I'd be working on.
Thank you. Sorry, continue. You might be writing briefings.
Yes. So writing briefings, also calls for evidence. So Parliament has committees, and you used to work in Parliament, so you'll know this. They have different committees who normally mirror government departments, right? And they also put out calls for evidence. So I'm always the one go-to in the UK team to submit those calls for evidence. So that would be what I'd be doing. I'd also be drafting letters to whether it's the Prime Minister or the Foreign Secretary, usually on behalf of my director or other MPs, because who's Nasim Salad, right? And then, yeah, but you know, the low pecking order. Or I might be writing an article for like the Telegraph, again on behalf of an MP, but I'll probably be the one drafting it. We would also map out the Parliament and, you know, what MPs to talk to. That is another piece of work that we would be doing continuously. So I feel like it does change, and obviously coronavirus has changed it, because usually I'd be out of the office a lot, meeting people, meeting government officials, meeting MPs, meeting other organisations, but now it's all on Zoom.
So it seems like there's a lot of writing involved in your job. Is that something you were aware of before you ended up in this role? Is this a skill that you definitely developed on the job?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different type of writing, isn't it? Well, I think the because it's persuasive writing, right? So you have to kind of convince people to like what you're writing. I don't know how I said that like that, but yeah. So it is a different kind of writing, because when you're at uni, you're just churning out like essays and dissertations, and it's like very like structured. It is still structured, but it's slightly different. So I think I was always good at writing, but I kind of had to adapt to like persuasive writing to try and get them on board. So sometimes I have to write things from like a center right perspective, even though my personal political views might not align with what exactly I'm saying, but I have to kind of talk to that person's language for them to get them on board. So that's a skill that I had to adapt to.
Very interesting. So sometimes you have to write or speak in a way that you're kind of wearing camouflage, as it is.
Yeah, because we know we're a non-partisan organisation, so we have no party political affiliations, and we have to talk to everyone, and everyone's fair game.
Yeah.
But if you're a politician because you're aligned, you have your political views, and if you're gonna pay attention to someone, you want them somewhat to understand where you're coming from. So I've got to be cognizant of that and adapt my writing to make sure that I know what they're about, basically.
I like that. What's the most difficult thing in your role? And what's something that you wish you had known before?
Oh, that's an interesting conversation. What is the most difficult thing? I think now in the political climate is probably trying to get more MPs on board, because before the general election, there was like no majority, right? Well, it was like slight majority, but not that big. So it was kind of like easier to get like MPs, but now that there's like a strong majority, that is less, I think, a little bit harder. And our political climate has completely changed, because from my adult life, all I've known is coalitions and no majorities in Parliament. And this is the first time working in the sector, or even just being someone who's allowed to vote and there being like a majority in Parliament. And that completely changes the dynamics of how government works, also how Parliament works. So that was quite difficult to try and wrap your head around, be like, right, we need to change our strategy here, because it's not working.
Mm.
But yeah, I think that's probably the most difficult.
And what's the most fun or the most kind of rewarding part of your job? Or maybe they're two separate things. Maybe something's really fun and the other is very rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the fun aspects is just like I like working with other people, so it's always quite nice to like meet up with other organizations and like plan and work stuff. But I also love working with our young volunteers because they're all amazing. I think like the proudest is like I recently did like a massive index and report on how government departments spend their aid budget. And that got great pickup, and I was like, oh my god, I did that by myself for 6 months. So I think that was probably like my proudest moment.
Amazing. Do your friends know what you do?
No. Absolutely not. Do you know, it's so funny. I was obviously out with my friends, and I think they're scared to ask me what I do now. Like every now and then I get a message being like, can you just do a quick 10-second voice note so I'm trying to explain. And I'm like, it's fine, guys. You don't know what I do. My mum doesn't either. She thinks I work for the UN. I don't work for the UN.
Oh my God. That's like when I was working for Rushanara Ali, so our local Tower Hamlets Labour Party MP. When I told this is like an ethnic mum thing. It's just making it bigger or to something that they understand. My mum was just convinced I was basically like an official in Parliament.
Yeah, literally.
And she was telling everyone her daughter was in UK Parliament, and I was like, I kind of am, but like nobody knows who I am.
No, but yeah, but even like my friends, they'd be like, oh, you work for the government. I'm like, no, guys, I don't work for the government. I do lots of work in politics, yes, but yeah, but I don't mind that, right? It's not their fault. I even struggle to explain what I do sometimes. It's hard. If I'm meeting someone, they know nothing about international development or politics or how policy works, and we're like, well, where do I want to start? How far should I go? But yeah.
Well, maybe your friends can listen back to this session.
Yes, I'm going to make them bookmark it.
To finally know what you do.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit more about, we're halfway through, let's talk a little bit more about, I would guess, not specifically just at one campaign. And this is maybe difficult for you to speak on because how much would you know about other companies, but within the same field of work or this industry, you've already mentioned your director is a woman also, right?
Yes.
Identifies as a woman. How many women are in this field? Do you often find yourself in rooms with many other women? Is it maybe different to relating sectors because it is a little bit more on the fighting the good fight of the fence? And if you look at, bodies above or sideways, like official government members, then you see more men, but in your sector it's more women. Like, how do you think it's divided?
Yeah, I think what you said is spot on. So in the sector, in the charity sector in general, lots of women. Like, I don't know why, but there's just lots of women. But I find it quite interesting because I've been to like events, like so I have to go to like round tables sometimes on like a particular topic. So sometimes I'll be in an event and it might be about specifically on like economic development, so like more the financial economic aspect of international development I think attracts more men, which is quite an interesting breakup. But yeah, if I'm civil servants, again, depends. If I'm in the Foreign Office, maybe more men. In the DFID, maybe more women. MPs tend to be more men. So yeah, I think it's really interesting. I don't know why that is, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of women in the charity sector though, for sure.
Maybe because women are really trying to make this world a better place.
Maybe. Maybe.
But that's just a guess. I just pulled that out of,
Yeah, honestly, I don't have the answer to sway, but who knows?
And let's talk intersectionality. Then do you see many women of color in your work, in your day-to-day work?
No, again, I think like it's no secret that the charity sector and the international development sector is very white. There's not many like Black or brown people in the sector, specifically in advocacy. So I could be in a room full of like 25, 30 organizations, and I will be the only Black or brown person in that room. And I'm used to that. I don't know why that is. I think maybe it is like stipulations. For example, like I know a lot of the people that I work in other organizations may like have gone to like Oxford or Cambridge, lots of Russell Group University, like I was gonna say expats, graduates.
I love that.
In those that work for the sector. And I don't know if that's it, because it's such a high standard now that they're just so used to just churning out. I don't know if that's one of the reasons why, or maybe Black or brown people are turned off by working in the sector because they think it can be neo-colonial, or again, I don't know why, but it's, in that space there's not many. And I actually you interviewed Nicole in one of your shows, but I was at her Black Girl Festival last year, and I was interviewing the Deputy Mayor of London, and she was like the first Black Deputy Mayor of London for the UK, which is mad because it's 2020. But she was talking a bit specifically about policy and how she doesn't think that there's enough like Black women or like just Black people creating policies in government, or just even understanding it or trying to influence it. And she was saying that she definitely thinks that we like need to do better in trying to make that a bit more equal and diverse.
And would you see that your youth ambassadors that you've mentioned a few times now, that you see a bit more diversity across that layer?
Yes, the youth ambassadors are so diverse, like really, really diverse. And again, I don't know why, but they're like, they really mirror the makeup of the UK. They are just an incredible, I just love meeting young people who are passionate and not like life has not sucked it out of them yet. And yet, because one might get there. But it's just so nice meeting like 17, 18-year-olds who are really passionate about international development and politics and want to change the world. I'm like,
oh wow, so they're really young, 17, 18.
Oh yeah, they range from 16 to 35. I might be lying, my campaign colleagues might kill me, but I feel like it's 16 to 35. So quite a wide bracket of what young is, but they're usually university or college kids.
Okay. And for anyone listening today who thinks, wow, what Nasim does sounds really interesting, I would like to, on what different levels could someone get involved? So let's say from anything from reading up about stuff to one day having your job. What advice would you give people? Where to look?
Yeah, I think so. There's so many different roles within the sector that you could. So if you wanted to work in international development, you don't have to necessarily be like a writing or a policy nerd like me. Like you might want to do marketing, and you might want to do digital marketing, and there's always jobs in that sector there. Or like I said, you might want to do media or campaigning and working with people on the ground. So I feel like there's such a wide scope of where you can kind of slot into if you wanted to work in the international development sector. But for policy specifically, I would definitely say like brush up on your writing skills, volunteer. I know it sounds cheesy, but you have to make your CV stand out somehow. And if you can show that you can show initiative and you can drive campaigns, so whether if it's like, I don't know, there's a problem with recycling in your constituency, do something about it. Be proactive, pull together petitions, try and meet your local MP, meet your local councillors, bring people together, and then you can put that on your CV, and it just shows that you have initiative and drive to actually make change. Because I think it's really important to try and make your CV stand out as much as possible. Obviously now you can't really volunteer abroad because coronavirus. Yeah, but I would say that would be my top advice.
That's great advice. I think also what we've learned throughout the series every time is you're not as far removed from certain layers of society as you may think you are.
Yes, people have. I always say this, and sometimes I get really angry, like in pub and smoking area, and someone tells me that they don't vote, and I'm like, why? Like people's voice matters, and I think the one thing that I've learned in working in this job is, no, 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 no. Trust me, collective voice works, pressure works. Parliamentarians will listen to their constituents, especially if they're in a marginal seat, because they get scared and they're like, whoop, people are rallying up against me. So definitely use your voice as much as possible.
Yeah, I think, again, something that keeps coming up as well is we are the majority. Whatever,
Yes.
whatever we might be, whoever that might be, every time you think you're not in the majority, you absolutely are.
Yeah.
And it's just about coming together, trying to make a change. And a change could be something, like you said, I don't want to call it something small because it isn't, but people might perceive it as something small. But starting a petition, there's more people who don't start a petition than people who do. So when you do, it means something.
Yeah, and if the petition has, I think, 100,000 signatures in the UK, then it has to be debated in Parliament. So your issue will be on the table, right?
This is also the whole thing. When now I think you come across 10 petitions a day.
Yeah.
Also, because of the power of social media and how everything is integrated, and it's becoming easier for us to sign a petition. One click, put in an email address, and you're done. I guess this is also something that I thought was really important, is when we do put certain, let's just call them influencers, whatever that means, whether they're like celebrities or people literally just off the internet, we put them on such a pedestal. But what voices are they amplifying? Are they encouraging you to sign whatever petition it may be? And I really want these sessions to kind of open people's eyes to who are also some other people, members of society, that we could follow on Instagram and maybe get a different perspective on what's going on, rather than a quote that's shared over and over again, but that doesn't.
Yeah, especially because like the issues that I work on are really serious
Very big.
and hard to understand and quite technical. So I guess reading like one paragraph of what's happening in Syria is not going to be very good. Like you're not going to get the best view of what's actually happening. But like you said, some people just want to do something small. So if that just means clicking my name onto a petition, then yeah, why not?
Why not? You're putting it very civilized, very politically correct. I would say that's not enough, but that's because I can't say this. So I will say it on behalf of everybody. Question, and without getting yourself into not trouble, you wouldn't get into trouble into this, but where do you see your career going? Or what are your dreams? Where would you ideally want to take this? And also, actually, where could someone in your position and role take this?
Lots of places actually. I could be in government, or I can even work in the private sector, or I could be like in another NGO, or I could work for like a multilateral institution or something like the UN or the EU. So there's actually so many avenues where your job can take you, because international development is massive and there's so many things happening. For me personally, yeah, I probably would like to work in government one day, but in like the Foreign Office, or now the new FCDO as it's called, because DFID and Foreign Office have merged into one big department.
Oh,
Yeah, so if you didn't know about that, guys, hotshot news. But yeah, probably something like that. But I really like working in the sector now. And I'm still young. I'm only 27 and I've only been here for 3 years. So I'm not rushing anytime soon.
no. So if anybody from One Campaign is listening right now, she's not trying to go anywhere. Don't worry about that. But I had to ask the question. Nasim was thinking, oh my God, if my director hears this, I'm not trying to leave. Hey, I want to ask you, we always end our sessions with the same, we always come back to the same thing, which is just the section that we call homework, which sounds really serious. It isn't. But I just want to ask you, what are some things you've been listening to, watching, reading that you would want to share with us? And it could be as serious as non-serious as you like.
So I'm actually reading *Sapiens* at the moment. So for ages, I used to put that book off and be like, it's just an overhyped book. Like, people are just loving it because it's like, you know, I just thought it was rubbish. But
Who
I
is
actually
it
started
by?
reading it, and it's bloody amazing. I can't remember the guy's name. He's Israeli and has not a difficult name to remember, but
I'm gonna
it's
find it.
amazing. It's literally describing the history of mankind, and he does it. It's like reading a documentary. It's unreal.
Book by Yuval Noah Harari.
There we go. Thank you. So I've been reading that at the moment, but every week I actually read The Economist. I think it's like my favorite news publication because it's very factual and it just tells you what you need to hear as opposed to like having an opinion. So like all the pieces in The Economist don't have the authors on there, which I think is quite cool because then you can just read it as like factual news. And it's the best in terms of I know what's happening in Argentina and also the UK.
Look at you, just. I like her. It's like, I just know what's happening here, but also
Not me personally, after I read it, obviously, because they have such a wide range. That just sounds like, yeah, I know everything about Argentina. I do that. Just small piece in The Economist every week. But yeah.
that's a really good shout. That's something that, you know, we haven't really heard. We haven't really heard about many actual publications throughout the series. Any films you've watched during, especially during these crazy like coronavirus and lockdown times? What have you been watching or binge watching or even binge listening to make you feel a little bit better?
I watch way too much TV for my own good.
Okay,
So
what do you watch? Tell me.
I watch everything, girl. I've nearly finished it, watching Sheets Creek, which is quite funny. And it's like this Canadian like family, and they were like really rich, and then they lose all their money and they end up in some like backwoods town in the middle of nowhere, and it's just them navigating their new life. So it's like a sitcom, and it's quite good. But I've really loved The Boys on Amazon Prime.
I don't know that.
You might not know this, Jyoty, but I'm a massive nerd and I love comic books. And it's like it's based on a comic book series, and it's on Amazon Prime, and it paints the heroes as villains, and that's all I'm gonna say. And it's incredible. And season 2 is coming out in 3 days. So
Okay, you're really on this.
yes.
Shall I tell you a funny story? That's actually not a funny story. So I discovered during lockdown, I'm just basically admitting now how stupid I am, but I realized during lockdown that I've been paying for Amazon Prime for, I think, about 2 years without realizing it.
How are you in your bag that much that you just didn't realize that money was coming out of your month every month and you had no idea?
So here's the thing, right? I discovered because lockdown happened, so all the parcels that normally would come to the office started coming to my house. Now my housemate goes, "You love your Amazon Prime, do you?" And I just went, "No, I don't have it." And he's like, "But I see you order things and the next day it comes in, so you have Amazon Prime."
And it has the Prime sticker.
Also, now I just didn't pay attention to the things. I also lived past tense, lived my life in a way where I wouldn't check my bank account. I just always would say a little prayer
I feel that.
when I make payments. So I don't really, and this is kids, young people especially, when you have control over your own accounts and finances, look at them.
Yeah. This is why Monzo is sick, because
So
it
important.
shames you. The minute you spend something, you get a notification on your phone like £11 Spotify. And I'm like, oh, thanks. But
All this whole time, I'd never checked my bank statement to see if there was an outgoing payment that I wasn't really agreeing with. And so only during lockdown have I discovered I can watch things on Amazon that I wasn't able to watch before.
yeah, it's a great platform. I mean, I'm not bigging up Amazon, but that's a whole different
That's a whole other
segment.
discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so I thought I'd just share that with you because you sound oh so wise, and I'm just very blessed to know you clearly.
And you?
I don't even know that I had Amazon Prime. Nasim, I want to thank you so much for this session. You, if I could just say so, but you know this because it's part of your job, but your way of speaking is very pleasant to listen to, but also you have definitely made your sector and your role within that sector a lot more tangible. And I
Thank you.
definitely know what you do now.
So you can be like my spokesperson if someone asks what I do, like ask Jyoty.
If you want to hire me
as my PA.
As your PR,
PR, I like it, yeah.
We could add another, brown person to the team.
Yeah, why not?
Keep it growing. Thank you so much for this. It's been very informative. If people want to find you or know what you're working on, know what One Campaign is doing, where can we find all these things?
So you can go onto our website, one.org, but there's also Twitter channels that you can follow. So we've got like a global one, I think it's called One Campaign, and there's a UK one, it's like one in the UK. But you can also follow me on Twitter, so it's at Nasim Salad. And I'm not going to lie, I do talk a lot. My tweets range from politics to pop culture, probably more on the pop culture side. So if you're thinking I'm going to tweet about international development, I do, but also I might be tweeting about Kanye West.
But I feel like those go hand in hand in a there's a correlation somewhere.
Pop culture and politics. Balance, right? I need balance. So,
and the two are coming closer and closer together. I mean, for anyone who watched Monica versus Brandy,
I need to watch that.
So you don't know what happened in the
I don't know what happened. No, that's viewing for later. It was on at 1 a.m. I was in bed.
Okay, so what you just said about pop culture and politics, watch the first 2 minutes and you're going to know what I'm talking about.
Damn, okay.
The two are coming closer together more than ever. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and hopefully to see you soon.